Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a little mini GynoCast. My name is Dr. Eric Heegaard, board-certified, not certifiable, obstetrician gynecologist. I'm here with Twila Dang, my buddy, my boss, co-person, wing person. And today we're talking about antibiotic resistance.
Yep.
And we're just doing a little thing because we're on hiatus. Believe it, right now, Twila and I are in rural India at an ashram. We're meditating.
Oh, you're right.
And eating.
You know I have children, right? That's not happening.
I forgot about that. But, well, we could, in our minds, we are meditating in an ashram, eating nothing but just wonderful vegan food, which is, painful for me and just heaven for Twila.
If you're going to have a fantasy place, at least be someplace you want to be.
You don't want to go to rural India and sit in an ashram?
No.
Why not?
Because then I wouldn't be on vacation. I like to be on vacation.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah.
So you had read some stuff about antibiotic-resistant syphilis.
Yeah, so in particular, I read an article recently that was talking about a sharp rise in syphilis rates for some reason in California, and particularly that the strains that are on the rise are very resistant to antibiotics, and that it's a growing concern sort of for this particular condition, and it's becoming a concern across the board. And I thought, I know a doctor, he's pretty smart, I want to ask him about it. So,
well, this is actually an area that is of great concern in the clinical medicine community and the infectious disease community, because we have a lot of antibiotics, and antibiotics have been wonderful in terms of controlling many diseases, but with improper use of antibiotics, we have seen resistance starting to rise and rise kind of in a scary fashion for certain things like syphilis and gonorrhea. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever read the Highlander series or listened to the Highlanders, we talk about this on the show.
We should be getting an endorsement as much as you talk about
we
the
really
Highlander
should.
series.
But Claire.
Don't start.
Claire is the main character, the female lead, the protagonist, and she is a nurse and then a doctor in the series. But she's been able to develop her own penicillin. This is back in the 1700s, right? She can use it for everything, and she saves her gorgeous husband's arm and this and that by giving penicillin because it works for everything, but there's no resistance. Now, there are many antibiotics. One of the things we're always looking at, it happens in every hospital, is that they're looking at bacterial cultures and seeing what these bacteria are sensitive to. And so we're giving the right thing. The problem is that what happens is if you, for example, we're giving a lot of antibiotics for viral infections, for colds and stuff, which antibiotics do not work for viruses, they work for bacteria. And so over time, we've been very kind of lax about giving antibiotics for things that don't necessarily need antibiotics, and also perhaps not the right antibiotic for the bacteria that we're trying to treat.
Right.
And what happens is if you give the wrong antibiotic, if the person doesn't take the course as described, that some of the bacteria that were killed that are targeted by the antibiotic do not die, and the ones that don't die are the ones that can fight against the antibiotic. Oh. And so then they start to grow, and all of a sudden you have a person with a bacterial infection now that is resistant to the antibiotic that you were giving them because you didn't give the appropriate antibiotic or it wasn't taken correctly.
So basically we're getting too many Z-Packs. We're not finishing our Z-Packs.
Right.
And this is all coming back to haunt us. Right.
And it is scary because in many, and I don't know if you've ever been down to Mexico, Twila, or in some other countries where you can just walk into the grocery store and get ciprofloxacin or Zithromax or, big time antibiotics. You don't need a doctor's prescription. You can just pick it off the shelf.
Oh, wow.
And it is, and that sort of thing is it's understandable. And I would do the same thing if I was sick and I needed something and I could get it without seeing a doctor. I would do the same thing. But the problem is that we are killing ourselves. We're putting ourselves at great risk for coming up with infections that we don't have good treatments for. Right. That's scary. And so why are we worried about this? Well, number one, you got to protect yourself. Syphilis, gonorrhea. Well, we talk a lot about this on this show about how to protect yourself. You have to advocate for your own health. You can't assume that whoever you're interacting with is not infected. Assume that they have been exposed to stuff. Use condoms. whatever you need to do to protect yourself. That's the first line thing. The other thing is if you start having symptoms, get into a clinic, see a practitioner who knows what they're doing and is doing the appropriate testing and is going to treat you with the appropriate antibiotics. Mm-hmm. It's very important.
I would guess so.
Because seriously, it's interesting you bring this up because this stuff comes across my desk and the different sites that I look at, and it's not something that people are talking about a lot, but it's getting more and more prominent in the media because this is going to get scary.
Well, is there, and I'm assuming like we're talking about this specifically within the context of certain conditions that are sort of germane to your line of work, but this is really becoming something that's growing across the board in all sort of health categories, right?
Absolutely. I look at tuberculosis. There are certain types of tuberculosis now that are very resistant to antibiotics, and that is frightening. And, we've got to start being very thoughtful as a medical community, as consumers, that we are using these medications, which are very powerful and very helpful, in a way that is thoughtful and appropriate, so we don't end up, at some point you go into a hospital with a dreadful infection, and something that we could have treated easily 10 years ago is now something that is, threatening your ability to survive.
Is this part of what they're talking about, like when they talk about things like superbugs in hospitals and things
precisely.
Like that? Okay, yep. And then, because I think there was at least a couple of years ago, we kind of all saw these sort of hospital stories over and over again about how somebody came to be treated for something and they got exposed or were suffering from some sort of superbug on top of that. So they couldn't be fully treated. We even saw cases of deaths in hospitals.
That's right.
Over the course. And that's, I guess it comes back to me, like, what can the actual like patient or consumer do to sort of better support this process of like not having these things get worse?
Well, that's a great question, and I think there's a couple things. One is protect yourself, right, as we were talking about. Mm-hmm. So, as best you can, try not to get exposed to things, and that's hard to do unless you're living in a rubber suit or in a bubble. Right. If you're never going to get off your couch, and that's most of us don't live that way. But during viral seasons, and the best thing you can do is to wash your hands and don't touch your nose, your eyes, or your mouth. And
wash your hands frequently, right?
Yeah. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands.
Okay, now what you wash your hands with, does that make a difference?
Soap and water.
Okay, because I think I was a parent, I've been a parent sort of in the early aughts, of the 2000 beyond.
I love that, aughts.
Yeah.
Aught 7.
Exactly.
Yeah, back in aught 7.
But, at least from 2000 to probably good 2009 to 2010, everything was antibacterial. Everything had to have antibacterial. Yeah. Even, there was antibacterial in your mouthwash. There was antibacterial soap, antibacterial shampoo, antibacterial wipes. Everybody had those little antibacterial things that hooked onto their keychain and stuff that you could just squirt in your kid's hand at any time. And then we found out, like, right a little after 2010, that there was some sort of chemical component that is terrible for children to be exposed to all the time. And we've been giving it to them like 8-9 times a day minimum.
Well, beyond that, too, it's also thought to be contributing to the rise of resistance. Mm-hmm. Because, we're washing our hands and using antibacterial stuff that for bacteria that are probably not harmful anyway.
So we're killing off the stuff that helps make our bodies stronger and able to fight things off.
And also soap and water. Good soap and water are fantastic antibacterial options, and it's again, this stuff. So it says that this soap or whatever is 99.9% effective in cutting out bacteria. Well, if you got 50 trillion bacteria and you knock out 99.9%, you still have billions of bacteria,
right?
And you don't want to be selecting out resistance among that, and so we should really be, for the most part, using soap and water under most circumstances. Okay. And again, if you're around somebody that is sick, wash your hands, wash. Avoid touching your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. If somebody's coughing, try to not be around them which is hard. I'm not trying to make this.
And you just immediately, as soon as you say don't touch your eyes, hands, or mouth, I immediately start blinking like something's wrong with my eyes.
Exactly.
I need to touch my eyes.
What do I do with my hands? What do I do with my hands?
Right.
But it's and you can, most of these things are transmitted by hands to mucous membranes, and but in respiratory, if you're coughing, when somebody coughs, it's amazing how those particles can go.
Well, just going
20
back to
feet.
like each teaching the old school method of like when if you have to cough and you're in contained space with a bunch of people, turning your head's not enough.
Yeah.
Use your hand to cover your mouth completely, or like we
the
try to
elbow.
teach our
They're doing the elbow
cough.
thing now.
And I even teach my children coughing in the elbow is appropriate unless you know it is. You can feel that it's a stronger cough or a harder cough. No, cover your mouth completely. People around you will appreciate it, and then just go clean your hands as quickly as possible.
That's
like
right.
you be smart about how you sort of conduct yourself, because we know we hate it. There's nothing worse than being in an elevator and somebody starts coughing, and then you're just like, I'm gonna die. Like every time I see somebody coughing in the winter,
You see the image of the green mist.
No, yeah, remember Outbreak? Remember that movie from a few years ago,
do
like
remember
from
that.
the '90s movie
Yeah.
Outbreak? And there's a point where the guy sneezes in the theater, and they watch the particles float over the crowd and go into the vents and go out into the main theater, and it was like about a plague that basically
right.
came.
Right.
That has been fixed in my head ever since I've seen that movie. So
Yeah.
I will virtually try to keep myself from. I will almost make my chest explode trying to hold in a cough as opposed to putting it out in the universe.
Yeah. And when somebody coughs, I hold my breath
Like I
and
don't
try to skip.
like it's gonna help.
Yeah. Like just try to run out and do something else. But so you can protect yourself, but also when you're seeing a doctor, if you're in the hospital or whatever, make sure that the doctors or providers or nurses are using the antibacterial foam because they should be. The way it works is we have inside and outside of the rooms, we have these foam antibacterial things. And so they should be washing their hands when they come in the room, before they touch you, and after they touch you, before they go out. They should, clean in, clean out.
And it's okay to ask them to if they haven't in front of you. If you didn't notice or recognize that they've done it, it's okay to ask them to do it.
That's right. And, we are, believe it or not, we are all people too. And sometimes, we're pretty compulsive about this, but
when ask them, don't just go, ew, wash your hands.
Yeah, really.
Just ask them.
Is that snot running down your elbow?
Just do it politely. We aren't children. We have a filter.
Yeah, that's right. And so, but protect yourself. Make sure people around you are being careful, and that's all we can do at this point. But be careful how you use antibiotics. Make sure they're used appropriately. Protect yourself, and stay tuned for the GynoCast. We'll talk more.